What happens when Hollywood royalty collides with actual royalty and neither side is willing to yield? Tonight, we're looking back at one of the most explosive late-night TV moments ever recorded. A clash so intense it ended with security stepping in and a guest being escorted out. This is the story of how a routine promotional interview spiraled into a duel of wit, ego, and public image that no one expected. The Jimmy Kimmel live studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy. Crew members adjusted cameras. Sound engineers ran final checks, and the audience settled in, unaware they were about to witness television history. Meghan Markle had come for what was meant to be a simple promotional appearance, part of her media tour for a new charitable initiative. Jimmy Kimmel, known for his sharp humor and ability to handle even the toughest interviews, was ready. His team had prepared the standard talking points: light questions meant to entertain and backup topics in case the conversation stalled. What no one anticipated was that Meghan had arrived with her own agenda, one that would put her on a direct collision course with the host from the very first question. As the theme music faded and applause died down, Jimmy grinned at the camera. The audience was lively, the perfect crowd for good television. Meghan entered with a poise and confidence that made her a global figure, waving before taking her seat across from Jimmy. "Welcome back to the show," Jimmy began warmly. "We're here with Meghan Markle, and I have to say, it's great to have you here." "How are you doing?" "I'm doing wonderfully, Jimmy. Thank you for having me," Meghan replied with a polished smile. To the audience, it seemed genuine, but Jimmy, skilled at reading guests, caught an underlying edge. "I know you're here to talk about your new foundation work." "Which sounds incredible," Jimmy said, leaning in with his signature casual tone. "But I have to ask, how are you finding life outside all the royal protocol? I mean, you can speak your mind now without everything going through advisors, right?" The question was lighthearted, the kind most guests would laugh off or spin into an anecdote. But Meghan's expression shifted, a subtle tightening that signaled Jimmy had stepped onto dangerous ground. "Well, Jimmy," she said pleasantly, but with sharper precision, "there's a misconception that I couldn't speak my mind before. I've always stood up for what I believe in, no matter the circumstances or institution I was part of." Sensing the change but trying to lighten things, Jimmy pressed on. "Right, of course. But surely there's a little more freedom now, too. You know, really let loose. I mean, back then, could you have come on a show like this and just told us what you really thought about everything?" Meghan's smile turned calculated. "I'm curious, Jimmy. What exactly do you think I should be telling you? What is it you're hoping I'll say that I supposedly couldn't before?" The audience laughed, assuming it was playful banter, but Jimmy realized his usual tactics weren't working. "I'm not looking for anything specific," he said, trying to regain control. "I think people are just curious about your experience. The behind-the-scenes side of things people don't usually see." "The behind-the-scenes," Meghan repeated, her tone edged now. "Do you mean how I was treated by the media? Or how certain outlets built narratives that had nothing to do with reality? Is that what you're fishing for?" Jimmy felt the interview slipping, but leaned into the tension. "Look, I think people just want to understand your perspective. You've faced a lot of public scrutiny, probably more than most could handle. How do you deal with that?" "How do I deal with scrutiny?" Meghan asked, her voice calm but fiery underneath. "By telling the truth, even when people don't want to hear it. By refusing to be silenced by institutions or individuals who think they can control the story of my life." The audience sensed the shift. This was no longer late-night banter. The energy in the room had turned charged and unpredictable. Jimmy tried steering back to safer ground. "Absolutely, and that's admirable," he said carefully. "But when you're in the public eye, people are always going to have opinions, and not all of them will be favorable. That's just part of the territory, right?" Meghan's eyes flashed. "Part of the territory. she repeated. Jimmy, are you suggesting the treatment I received, the racist undertones, the deliberate misrepresentation of everything I said and did, was something I should have just accepted as part of the territory? The studio went quiet. This was no longer light entertainment. It had turned into something else entirely, something no one in the room had expected. Jimmy found himself in the uncomfortable position of having triggered a far deeper conversation than he'd intended. "I'm not suggesting that at all," he said carefully. "Racism is completely unacceptable, and if that's what you experienced, that's terrible. What I'm trying to understand is how you separate legitimate criticism from the unfair attacks." Legitimate criticism. Meghan's voice rose, and Jimmy knew he had only made things worse. "Tell me, Jimmy, what exactly should I be legitimately criticized for? For marrying the man I love? For trying to modernize an institution that desperately needed change? For speaking up about causes I care about?" Jimmy was now in uncharted waters. His usual arsenal of jokes and light deflections felt useless against the weight of Meghan's emotion. A quick glance at his producers showed they were just as uncertain as he was. "I don't think you should be criticized for any of that," he said. Searching for solid ground. "I think people sometimes struggle to understand the line between your public role and your private feelings. In the royal family, there are probably expectations about handling disagreements privately rather than publicly." "Privately versus publicly," Meghan repeated, her tone sharpening. "And what happens when the private channels fail? When the institution refuses to protect you or worse, works against you. What then, Jimmy? Do you suggest someone just suffers in silence for appearance's sake?" The weight of the studio's attention pressed down on him. Every audience member, every camera operator, every producer knew this interview had crossed into unexpected territory. Jimmy had handled meltdowns, controversies, even politics on air, but this felt different. Personal, dangerous. "I think," he said slowly, "most people would agree there are different ways to handle difficult situations. Sometimes, working within the system, frustrating as it is, can be more effective than making everything public." Meghan's laugh was sharp, cutting through the air. "Working within the system, Jimmy? The same system that leaked stories about me while refusing to correct obvious lies. The same system that questioned my children's heritage before they were even born. Tell me, what part of that system was I supposed to work with?" The room fell silent. This was no longer entertainment. It was raw, real, and Jimmy could feel control of the show slipping away. His producers gestured frantically behind the cameras, but he couldn't tell if they wanted him to cut to commercial, change the subject, or somehow salvage the wreck. "Look, Meghan," Jimmy said at last, abandoning his jovial persona, "I think we're in pretty heavy territory here. I wasn't trying to attack you or minimize what you've been through. I just wanted to have a conversation." "A conversation?" Meghan repeated, incredulous. "Jimmy, you invited me here to discuss my charitable work. Yet you've spent the entire time questioning my choices, implying I mishandled mistreatment, and suggesting I somehow brought negative attention on myself." Frustration flickered in Jimmy's expression. He had tried to be respectful, to ask questions the audience would want answered. Yet every word seemed to be received as an attack. "That's not what I was doing," he said firmly. "I was trying to understand your perspective. But you're making it sound like asking any questions at all about your experience is offensive." "Asking questions isn't offensive, Jimmy," Meghan shot back, her composure starting to crack. "It's the assumptions built into your questions, the suggestion that I should have quietly accepted mistreatment for some greater good. That's offensive." The tension in the room was palpable. Audience members shifted uneasily in their seats, uncertain whether they should even be watching this unfold. Normally, Jimmy would crack a joke, cut the tension, but instinct told him humor now would be fatal. "I never suggested you should accept being treated poorly," Jimmy said, his voice rising slightly. But there's a difference between standing up for yourself and airing private family matters on international television. Some people might see that as crossing a line. Some people might see that as crossing a line. Meghan echoed. Her eyes locked on him. Are you one of those people, Jimmy? Do you think I crossed a line by telling my story when no one else would tell it truthfully? Jimmy realized he was cornered. If he said yes, he would openly criticize her and risk his relationship with her camp. If he said no, he would contradict his own point and appear weak. I think, he said cautiously, that everyone has the right to tell their story. But when you're part of a family, especially a very public one, there are consequences to how you choose to tell it. Consequences. Meghan's voice carried a dangerous edge. Are you threatening me, Jimmy? Are you suggesting there should be consequences for speaking the truth about my own life? A shocked murmur rippled through the studio. Jimmy's eyes widened as he realized how his words had landed. No, that's not what I meant, he said quickly. I wasn't threatening anyone. I just meant that actions have reactions. That's all. Actions have reactions, Meghan repeated slowly, nodding. So when I was subjected to racist coverage in the press, when my mental health was being shattered and my family attacked, I should have thought more about how defending myself would be perceived. I should have asked whether protecting my well-being was worth making others uncomfortable. Jimmy felt like he was drowning. Every answer he gave only dragged him deeper into a hole he hadn't even noticed digging. The audience sat in silence, watching with the horrified fascination usually reserved for car crashes. That's not what I'm saying, Jimmy insisted. I'm not saying you shouldn't defend yourself. I'm just suggesting there might have been other ways to handle it, ways that weren't so, I don't know, extreme. Meghan's voice was deadly quiet. Jimmy, you think me telling the truth about my experiences was extreme? You think a woman speaking openly about racism and mental health struggles is an overreaction? Sweat formed on Jimmy's forehead. The studio lights, which had never bothered him before, now felt unbearable. I didn't say it was an overreaction. I just think that when it comes to family issues, sometimes it's better to deal with them privately. Family issues? Meghan repeated, her tone making it clear he had only worsened things. Jimmy, this isn't about a holiday disagreement. This is about systemic racism, a mental health crisis, the safety of my children. Are those the kinds of things you think should be handled privately? The audience shifted uneasily. Whispers broke out as producers gestured frantically from behind the cameras. But Jimmy couldn't tell what they wanted to end the interview. Keep going, salvage something. I think, Jimmy said tightly. Some matters are addressed more effectively through private channels than public interviews. Private channels. Meghan laughed bitterly. Jimmy, private channels failed me. They were part of the problem. When institutions refuse to protect those they're supposed to, what do you expect people to do? Jimmy was running out of ground. Every attempt to soften his stance only met sharper pushback, and anger began to rise in him. Look, I'm not denying the situation was hard for you. I'm not saying your grievances weren't real. But surely you can see why some people think airing family laundry in public isn't the best solution. Family laundry. Meghan's voice turned icy. Is that what you think I was doing? You think my experiences with racism were just dirty laundry I should have kept hidden? The studio was so silent Jimmy could hear the air conditioning hum. Faces in the crowd ranged from uneasy to openly shocked. Some shaking their heads, others whispering. A few looking ready to leave. That's not what I meant, Jimmy said weakly, hearing himself sound unconvincing. Then what did you mean? Meghan leaned forward, eyes locked on his. Because it sounds like you think I should have suffered in silence instead of making anyone uncomfortable with the truth. Jimmy stared at her, realizing he had underestimated her entirely. The woman sitting before him was no longer the polished, diplomatic figure who had walked on stage minutes earlier. This Meghan was raw, unfiltered, relentless in her pursuit of justice. "I think we need to step back," Jimmy said, desperation creeping into his voice. "This conversation has gotten much more heated than either of us intended. Has it, Jimmy?" Meghan's voice was razor sharp. "Or is this exactly what you wanted to bring me here? Expecting I'd smile and deflect while you questioned every decision I made to protect myself and my family." Something in Jimmy snapped. For years, he had stayed professional, diplomatic, smoothing over the roughest interviews. But now, facing someone who seemed determined to cast him as a villain no matter what he said, his composure cracked. "You know what, Meghan?" His voice was harder now, the charm gone. "I brought you on because I thought you wanted a real conversation. Instead, you've turned every question into an attack on your character. Frankly, I'm tired of being painted as a racist monster for asking normal interview questions." The audience gasped. Jimmy Kimmel, long seen as the consummate professional, had just openly clashed with his guest on live TV. Meghan's eyes flashed, almost satisfied, as though this was what she had been waiting for. "Normal questions," she said quietly. "Tell me what's normal about spending an entire interview questioning why someone spoke out about mistreatment. Tell me what's normal about implying a woman should have handled racism and mental health struggles differently. I never questioned your right to speak," Jimmy shot back, his professionalism gone. "I questioned how you did it. There's a difference between standing up for yourself and burning everything down in the process." Burning everything down. Meghan's voice rose for the first time. "What exactly do you think I destroyed by telling the truth about my life?" "You destroyed any chance of reconciling with your family," Jimmy blurted, the words slipping out before he could stop. "You made it impossible for anyone to have a relationship with you without choosing sides. You turned private pain into public spectacle." The studio fell utterly silent. Even the cameras seemed to pause as everyone absorbed Jimmy's words. Meghan stared at him for a long moment. Jimmy noticed a shift in her expression that made his stomach sink. "Public spectacle." Meghan repeated slowly. "Jimmy, is that what you think my pain is?" "Entertainment." Jimmy knew he'd crossed a line he couldn't retreat from, but anger and frustration pushed him forward. "I think you've built a career around your grievances, and I think people are growing tired of hearing how difficult your life has been when you've had opportunities most can only dream of." The audience erupted shocked murmurs. Angry voices, people rising from their seats. Jimmy saw his producers scrambling, desperate to contain what was fast becoming a disaster. Meghan rose slowly, deliberate and composed. "Jimmy, let me be clear. You think that because I've had opportunities, I should have endured racism silently? You think marrying into privilege erased my right to speak about discrimination?" Jimmy stood too, his anger overruling caution. "I think that with your platform and influence, you have a responsibility to use it constructively, not to settle scores or make everyone around you look bad. Make everyone look bad." Meghan's voice trembled not with fear, but with fury. "I didn't make anyone look bad. I told the truth about how I was treated. If that truth reflected poorly on them, maybe they should reconsider their behavior instead of blaming me for speaking the truth according to you." Jimmy shot back. "Your version, your interpretation. But there are always two sides to a story, aren't there?" Meghan's face went pale. "Two sides, Jimmy? What's the other side of racism? What's the other side of pushing someone to the brink of suicide? Please, enlighten me. What's the other perspective on those experiences?" Jimmy felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, but couldn't stop himself from leaping. Maybe the other side is that sometimes criticism is justified, and playing the race card isn't always the right response. The words hung in the air like poison. The audience erupted in chaos, shouting, booing, people rushing for the exits. Meghan's expression was beyond hurt, beyond anger, pure contempt. Playing the race card, she whispered, her voice carrying across the studio. Jimmy Kimmel just told a biracial woman she was playing the race card while discussing her experiences with racism. Jimmy's face drained of color as he realized what he'd said. It was too late. The words were out, and everyone had heard them. "That's not what I meant," Jimmy began. But Meghan cut him off. "It's exactly what you meant. And now everyone sees who you really are." She stepped away from her chair, dignity intact amid the chaos. "I came here to talk about charitable work, about making a positive difference. Instead, you spent the entire interview attacking me, questioning my motives, and dismissing my experiences with racism. Meghan, please, let's just calm down." Jimmy started. "Don't you dare tell me to calm down." Her voice sliced through the noise like a blade. "You just invalidated every racist experience I've endured, and you expect me to calm down?" Producers signaled for security, the situation spiraling far beyond control. The audience was split, some firmly with Meghan, others siding with Jimmy. The tension threatened to explode. "I think we need to end this interview," Jimmy said, glancing helplessly at his team. "Oh, we're ending it," Meghan shot back, her voice clear above the uproar. "But not because you want to. Because I refuse to sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly has no idea what racism actually looks like." Security approached, not to remove her, but to restore order. Meghan raised her hand. "I don't need an escort," she said firmly. "I can walk out on my own." Turning to Jimmy one last time, she added, "I hope one day you understand what you revealed about yourself tonight. And I hope you think about why you felt the need to attack someone for speaking their truth." "Meghan, I wasn't attacking you," Jimmy said weakly, his words drowned by the uproar. "Double quotes, yes, you were," Meghan replied simply. And everyone saw it. With that, she walked off stage, head high, leaving behind chaos, an outraged, divided audience, and a shaken host just beginning to grasp the scale of what had unfolded. As security followed to ensure she reached her car safely, the cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of what would surely go down as one of the most disastrous late-night interviews in history. What began as a routine promotional appearance had ended with a guest storming off set after a clash that exposed raw truths about race, privilege, and accountability, truths no one had expected to surface so publicly.